Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on, putting on. Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on, putting on. Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on. Where you from?
Welcome to Popcorn Sports on the Popcorn Entertainment Network. I'm your host, Mike Kyle, and welcome to yet another episode of why you should root for every team in the NBA for the 2018-2019 season. I, of course, am not alone. We are joined here by Chris Kline of the SixerSense.com. You can follow him on Twitter at KlineNBA. We are here to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers today. Chris, introduce yourself. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. And the first question I like to ask all of my guests when they come on is, how did you become a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers? What's your origin stories with the Sixer Sense?
Yeah, so about 2.5, 3 years ago, I started as a contributor at the Sixers. I hadn't really, I wasn't that familiar at the time with Philly as an area, but over the time, I've moved up to a site expert, an editor role, and I've really been following this team closely for about 3 years now. And it's just a great city, a great fan base, a really special team, I think, as we saw this past season. And I've just really enjoyed my time with the site. So it's been a really fun journey.
Absolutely. And I mean, you came in during the middle of the process and have since kind of seen the results. We'll get into that in a second. But first, I want to dive into some general overview of the Philadelphia 76ers, They were originally the Syracuse Nationals in 1949. They moved to Philadelphia in 1963. And they're called the 76ers because obviously the Declaration of Independence, America, was signed in Philadelphia in 1776. For all of you history buffs out there, they have 48 playoff appearances and 3 championships, with their last being in 1983. They play in the Atlantic Division with Boston, Brooklyn, New York, and Toronto. And additionally, their team colors are red, white, and blue because, like I said before, hashtag America. And they were super bad. Now they're super fun and exciting, and trust the process. So before we kind of dive into last season and things of that nature, explain the process to those who don't know.
Yeah, so about, I would say, 6-7 years ago, Sam Hinkie took over as general manager after an extended period of time in which the Sixers were hovering around the bottom half, I would say, of the playoff picture in the East. He used to work under Daryl Morey in Houston, a big analytics guy, and he basically stripped the entire roster down, traded Jrue Holiday, who was the Sixers' lone all-star at the time, on draft night when they picked Nerlens Noel and Michael Carter-Williams, which is kind of the first year of the process, which is basically just rebuilding to the extreme, focusing on draft capital, taking on bad contracts, and getting as many top first-round picks as possible. That way you could get that top-level talent like Embiid and Simmons through the draft instead of trying to get those big free agents, which Philly wasn't exactly doing at the time. And, it took about 4 or 5 years. Brian Colangelo came on in 2016. That's when they got Simmons. And things have been going uphill since. Colangelo's now gone, but he really put the Sixers in a position to get the guys they have now and to take this step forward that they've taken.
Absolutely. And, let's talk about last season now. So they finished 52-30, third seed in the East, a really great season. They ended the year on an incredible run after a little bit of a rocky start. But I feel like, personally, even though they did start off a little bit rocky, you still kind of saw them start to gel together early on. And all of that ultimately ended up in an Eastern Conference semifinals loss to the Boston Celtics. What can you make of last season for me?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it started off a bit slow. They were around 500 at Christmas. But I think bringing in some veteran guys like J.J. Redick, Marco Bellinelli, and Ersan Ilyasova at the buyout deadline really kind of helped the young guys get comfortable. Simmons took a big step forward in the second half of the season, really got comfortable with his role. Embiid was great all year. Prior to his late season injury, he's probably one of the 10 best players on the planet. And I think we saw that this Sixers team is probably going to be one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the East for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree. I think just the dynamics between the Sixers and the Celtics for years to come in the Eastern Conference, now that LeBron's out west, is going to be really fun and exciting. So let's kind of break down this roster a little bit, because there's a lot of different pieces here, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on them. So there's obviously Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, J.J. Redick, Marquel Folds, Dario Saric, Covington. You got, he's brought in Wilson Chandler and Zyger Smith in the draft, T.J. McConnell, Landry Shamet. What can you make of this year's roster and the kind of structure that it's in place?
Yeah, I think two of their biggest areas of concern last year were playmaking in the half court and defense in the second unit, which I think we saw kind of hurt them against Boston in the playoffs. Having another guy who can kind of take pressure off Simmons and Embiid and create his own shot, play make for others. Hopefully Marquel Folds fills that role this year. And adding guys like Wilson Chandler, Zaire Smith, Mike Muscala to the second unit who can defend at a high level and still contribute on offense is going to be, I think, a big plus for them. And you, of course, have Embiid and Covington, who are probably two of the 15 best defenders on the planet. Simmons is really good on that side as well. Lots of versatility with Embiid kind of locking down the paint. And you have Simmons, who's one of the best playmakers in the league himself. You know, up there with LeBron and in that level as a passer already. He obviously needs to improve his scoring, kind of stretch out his offensive game a little bit more in that regard. But in terms of setting up players for success, pushing the tempo, they're going to be really good on both ends this year.
Yeah, I agree. And there's two players that I really want to focus on, and then we can kind of jump into some underlying players as well. But the first player I want to talk about is Ben Simmons, because naturally the first question I have to ask you is how many threes is he going to hit this year?
I really don't know. It's really tough to kind of guess that because he didn't take an actual, like, in the flow of the offense attempt last year. He had 11 technically, but they were all at the buzzer heaves. So we really don't know what to expect in that regard. Theoretically, he's been working on his shot this offseason, but I would expect that to be focused more on mid-range jumpers. But, I don't... Maybe 5 or 10 would be the over-under, but I doubt he's going to hit or even take a lot of threes this season.
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting with Simmons, because he is so talented and, there are... the LeBron comparison is there. I feel like that's just a definite thing that we saw last season. And, for him to be, a good defender, for him to be able to bring the ball up the floor as a point guard, for him to be able to have that passing ability as well, for him to not have that outside shot is just really weird. And I know LeBron didn't have that either, but LeBron at least had somewhat of a respectable outside game to start. With Simmons, it's just sag off him and just, let him attack you down the middle.
Yeah.
You're going to give him open shots. And so do you think that there is going to be a progression in his game?
Yeah, I think really what it comes down to is in high school and before, with his physical gifts and his playmaking ability, he didn't really have to take a lot of jumpers because he could just get to the rim and do whatever he needed against lesser competition. So I think that's going to be more of a long-term focus now that he has to take a jumper to really take his game to the next level. It's something he's going to work on, but I wouldn't expect immediate top-level results next season, obviously. So I think it'll take a few years for him to really develop that part of his game.
What do you think his ceiling is?
I mean, absolute ceiling is probably a top 5 player. He has the physical tools, the defensive ability, the playmaking. I mean, obviously, we've seen that his ceiling is really, really high. If he can become more capable off the ball, add a bit of a jumper, even if it's not a 3-point shot, even if it's just Giannis level shooting, not elite, but just have that threat. Like you mentioned with LeBron in the younger years. He can get to that top 5 level. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not he improves those ancillary parts of his game, which I think he should. I don't think there's any reason to believe that he won't make some improvements over the next few years.
Right, I think he's going to as well. And with that, I kind of want to shift gears now to the other player, the other side of the coin. That's Marquel Folds, who just last season, I mean, let's be honest, it was a train wreck last year. He had this shoulder injury, and nobody knew what was actually going on. There was the whole dynamic between him and the team, and how they're handling it, and it obviously just rock slided. That's the only way I can put it. It rock slided into turmoil between the two sides. And with that, where do you think that Fultz goes from here?
Yeah, it was a really weird season. It really got off to a rocky start, like you mentioned, but I do think it kind of turned positive at the end. Once he returned, he obviously showed that he can make an impact even without a jumper. I think he gained some confidence as the end of the year went on. I think the coaching staff is behind him. I know the fan base especially is really supportive of him. So I think he has a lot of positive momentum going into this summer, going into next season. He's been working with Drew Hanlon, who is a really, I would say, famous skills coach at this point. He's been working with Embiid as well. So the idea is that his jumper has made some positive strides this summer. I don't expect it to be, where it was at Washington a few years ago, but he should be able to at least threaten from the three-point line on occasion, if not, hit at least a few mid-range jumpers. It's moving in the right direction. And I do think he's going to play a significant role this year because of his playmaking and his half-court scoring, which, as I mentioned earlier, is an area where the Sixers really need some help.
Absolutely. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Foles had a triple-double last year, didn't he?
He did. He ended the season with a 13, 10, and 10 against Milwaukee. Part of that was kind of because it was garbage time at that point, and he was able to kind of pad his stats in the fourth quarter. But it was a really great game, and one of the highlights, I would say, of the 16-game win streak.
Absolutely, and it's just like, I just feel like for a guy to go through those early season struggles that Fultz did, obviously with the injury, and having what many people called the yips about shooting, for him to really just come back and for him to have a triple-double, even if it is in garbage time during one of the last games of the year, like, that means something, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's still a special talent. He got drafted first overall for a reason. His passing is already at a really high level. He showed some really promising flashes on defense. And even without a jumper, he has the ability to impact the game with his playmaking, his slashing ability. So as long as his jumper makes some level of progression over the next few seasons, I think he's going to be fine. He still has an all-star level ceiling, and he still could very well be the third star that the Sixers have been searching for.
Right, and now I want to give you just some room here. Give me one or two guys who you're really excited about watching this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think Fultz is probably number one for me. But in terms of guys we haven't really talked about, if Zaire Smith gets back, I think he's going to be a really nice, secondary punch on the bench. He might not get big minutes early on, but he's going to be a really, really special perimeter defender. We've already seen that in Summer League and in college. He has all the athleticism in the world. He's a bit undersized for the wing, but his length, strength, and leaping ability is going to help him overcome that. I think he's going to be a really positive addition. And I think Mike Muscala, who is a guy they added in a trade this offseason, is going to be a really underrated addition. I think he's going to get minutes at both the 4 and the 5 behind Embiid and Sarge. Can shoot the ball, defend pretty well, moves around well off the ball. I think he's going to be a really important bench piece as the season goes on.
Absolutely. So now let's kind of shift gears over to the fan base and the fun surrounding the Philadelphia 76ers, because right now there's a lot of it. You obviously have the whole trust the process, the Sam Hinkie, the Brian Colangelo burner accounts, which was the story of the NBA last season. The rivalry with the Celtics is now renewed, and Embiid's Twitter game is always fun. What can you just give me some insight here to the Philadelphia 76ers fandom and their culture?
Yeah, I think there's a very good argument to be had that Philly has the best fan base in the country. I mean, I think we've seen it, just their reputation overall. They've always been known as a great sports town. They're a really passionate group. They really get behind their teams. They stuck with them through 5 years of pretty persistent losing during the process, which I don't know if a lot of fan bases would have really been as willing as Philly fans were to endure that. And obviously, as we saw even with the Eagles this year with the Super Bowl, they're just a really passionate fan base, really support their teams, and it's just a really special group of fans that I've been able to kind of work with and be in contact with over the past few years.
Absolutely. And do you think that the Philly fans stuck with the Sixers throughout this process because they branded it as the process and because Sam Hinkie was so vocal and so open about the plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sixers fans, more than perhaps some outsiders looking in, really understood his vision, where the team was going, kind of the premise behind the rebuild, and that the Sixers weren't going to be big players in free agency. They were kind of plateauing around the bottom of the playoff picture. So stripping it down, rebuilding, going for that high-end draft capital was really the best way to get them to the next level, the level that they weren't going to reach as they were. And I think they really embraced that. Obviously, Embiid, with his social media presence, he really embraced it. A lot of players on the roster embraced it, and so I definitely think was a big reason why.
Right, and you know what? Twitter culture now and Twitter subcultures for teams and fan bases has obviously become so big and so widespread. And with Embiid kind of pushing and that's the thing. Embiid got behind the process. He was part of it, and he just stacked up with it. He's like, all right, this is what we're doing. I'm bought in. So what can you make of how just Sixers Twitter is as a whole, because Embiid is like, that's the thing. Embiid is in the trenches with you guys. So what does that dynamic create?
Yeah, Sixers Twitter catches a lot of flack, for being over the top sometimes. But again, like I mentioned, it's just a special group of really passionate fans. I've been in contact with a lot of really smart people in Sixers Twitter who know what they're talking about and understand the game, really understand how this team is set up, their goals, and how things are working. As you mentioned, Embiid's right there with us at times, with his Instagram and his Twitter comments. So it's just a really fun group that has really bought into the team, the culture, and the rebuild as a whole.
Right. Do you have like a specific moment that sticks out to you when you think of your time covering the Sixers?
I've always been a big draft geek. So, when I kind of started on during the midst of the 2016 draft season when Simmons was the pick, that was really fun for me. And I think last year Marquel Folds' progression was odd, but, he's a player I've always been high on, and I think his return was a really special moment during the season. So those are two that really kind of stick out to me. Obviously, Embiid's return to the court was equally as large as, if not much larger than Fultz. He's obviously a special talent. So there's been a lot of moments like that.
Absolutely. And we're going to get you out of here on this. You have 30 seconds to pitch anybody why they should be a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers for the 2018-2019 season. The floor is yours.
All right, well, you got two really special talents in Embiid and Simmons. Both Embiid's probably a top 10 player. Simmons is working towards that top 25 level. You got a really exciting complementary cast with Fultz ideally coming back. Redick's fun to watch with his shooting, off-ball movement. Covington's an elite 3-and-D talent. And I think you have probably the best young core in the league and a team that's going to be competitive at the highest level in the Eastern Conference for the next 10 years, assuming everyone stays healthy. Boston might be the top dogs right now, but the Sixers have the talent to challenge them and eventually overtake them. And I think they're as well set up as anybody to really compete for the foreseeable future with how young the team is. So it's just a really exciting fan base, really exciting team, and things are trending in the right direction. So I would definitely suggest.
Very well said. You're totally fine. No worries. I just think that it's going to just be an absolute dogfight over the course of the next. I was gonna say 3 teams with the Sixers, the Raptors, and the Celtics, but I don't know nobody knows what Kawhi's gonna do. But if Kawhi were to stay in Toronto on some whim, then I think you're gonna see a really nice 3-headed battle for like the next 5 to 10 years or so in the Eastern Conference. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely, and they're all in the same division too, so they all see each other 4 times a year. And they're all in the same general area on the map, so it's just a really fun rivalry that's brewing. Kawhi's obviously a special player, so if he stays, the Raptors are going to be right with Philly and Boston, if not maybe even a league ahead of them to start next season. So it should be really, really a great few years of basketball.
Absolutely. That division aspect is something I completely forgot about. But thank you, Chris, so much for coming on. You guys can follow Chris at Kline NBA on Twitter. He's the site expert for the SixersSense.com. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Hey, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We're going to do this for every team in the NBA, so be sure to stick around for that. And with that, we'll catch you next time. Thank you all so much for checking out today's video. If you are new here, click the video right above my head. It's going to give you all the details about the Popcorn Entertainment Network. If you want to see the latest video from this series, click the upper left-hand corner and be sure to check all the boxes down to the left of me. That includes subscribing, get your butt in the bucket. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Hit that like button, share it with a friend, interact with us down below in the comments section, and last but not least, check out our website, popcornent.com, where we post all new and exclusive content. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media at popcornentnet on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, we'll see you next time.